Cleetus McFarland arrived at Michigan with something most drivers spend entire seasons chasing, a pole position that immediately shifted expectations around his weekend. The speed was undeniable in qualifying, the execution on a single lap was clean, and for a brief moment it looked like everything was aligning for a breakthrough performance. But Michigan is not a place that rewards single-lap perfection. It exposes what happens when a car has to live in traffic, adapt over long runs, and survive the smallest mistakes that slowly turn into race-changing problems. And Michigan does not care about your qualifying lap. From the opening stretch of the race, there was still real promise in what Cleetus McFarland had underneath him. The speed that delivered the pole was not imaginary. It showed up in clean air, it showed up in early laps, and it showed that the baseline performance was absolutely there. For a brief moment, it looked like this could turn into one of those weekends where everything finally connects. But Michigan has a way of changing tone without warning. As the race settled into longer runs, the first signs of trouble started to appear. The car that felt sharp in qualifying trim began to tighten up through the center of the corners. The rotation that allowed him to set a fast lap started fading away, and suddenly the driving style had to change. Instead of letting the car roll naturally, he had to force it, correct it, and manage it in real time just to keep pace with the front group. That's where the real race begins at a place like Michigan. It's not about the first 10 laps, it's about what happens when the tire load builds, when traffic enters the picture, and when the balance window starts shifting half a tenth at a time until it becomes something completely different from what you started with. For Cleetus, that shift came early enough to matter. The advantage from pole position started to disappear as the handling issue grew more noticeable. What once looked like a car capable of controlling the race began slipping into a battle just to maintain track position. The more the car tightened up, the harder it became to carry speed through the long sweeping corners, and at Michigan, that loss multiplies down the straightaways. Then came the moment that changed the direction of the entire race. A brush with the wall. It wasn't a heavy race-ending impact, but in stock car racing, especially on a fast intermediate track like Michigan, there is no such thing as a harmless mistake against the outside wall. Even a slight contact is enough to shift the behavior of the car immediately. The vibration starts creeping in, the steering feel changes, and the driver begins losing trust in what the car is going to do next. Cleetus felt it right away. The rhythm that existed earlier in the race was gone. Every lap now required more correction, more caution, and more effort just to keep the car stable. What had been a race built on early speed turned into a race defined by managing damage that could not be reversed on track. And once that balance is lost at Michigan, it rarely returns. From that point forward, the race stopped being about attacking and became about survival. Positions that once looked secure began to slip away as other drivers found cleaner rhythm and more stable handling windows. The difference wasn't effort, it wasn't aggression. It was simply that the car was no longer delivering the same level of performance it had at the start. That's the part of racing fans often miss when watching from the outside. A car doesn't have to be completely broken to fall backward. Sometimes it just has to be slightly off, just enough to stop being competitive at the front, and that small gap turns into a steady slide through the field. As Cleetus tried to manage the situation, the race got even more complicated. A three-wide moment developed in traffic, tight racing, limited space, and no real room for hesitation. In that situation, decisions happen in fractions of a second. He later admitted that he may have been too aggressive in that moment, and that choice ended up adding more contact and more damage to a car that was already struggling to hold its shape. Once that additional damage entered the equation, the margin for recovery basically disappeared. From there, the race transitioned into something completely different from what it started as. The pole position no longer mattered in terms of race control. The early speed no longer translated into competitive pace. The focus shifted entirely toward making it to the finish without further escalation. By the time the final stage arrived, the original storyline had already been erased. No longer a pole sitter controlling the pace. No longer a car capable of fighting at the front. Just a machine trying to get through the distance in one piece while dealing with vibration, balance issues, and lost rhythm that never fully returned. The official result shows 14th, but that number doesn't capture the full arc of what happened across the day. It doesn't show the handling collapse after long runs, and it doesn't show how quickly one small moment against the wall can change the entire identity of a race. After the checkered flag, Cleetus McFarland didn't hide from what happened. His reaction was direct and grounded. He pointed to the car tightening up, and he acknowledged how those factors combined to take away the pace he started with. He also took responsibility for the three-wide situation, not shifting blame outward, but recognizing how that moment contributed to additional damage. That level of honesty matters in ARCA, where every race is part result and part development, because this weekend wasn't just about finishing positions. It was about understanding how quickly a race can change when the setup window closes and the car stops responding the way it did in qualifying. The pole position proved the speed was real. The race proved that speed alone is never enough when the balance shifts and the car starts fighting back. And that's the real takeaway from Michigan. It exposed the gap between single-lap performance and full-distance control. It showed how quickly early dominance can turn into mid-race struggle. And it reinforced the reality that in stock car racing, especially at this level, adaptability matters just as much as raw pace. Looking ahead, Cleetus McFarland moves toward the Truck Series with a weekend that delivers both confidence and caution. The confidence comes from the pole position, from proving the speed is there. The caution comes from what happens when that speed has to survive long runs, traffic, and changing track conditions. Michigan becomes a reference point now, not as a disaster, not as a breakthrough, but as a full race reality check. A weekend where everything started at the front and slowly unraveled into a lesson about control, consistency, and how quickly momentum can disappear when the car steps outside its window. For NASCAR Nation News, this was never just a finish. It was a transformation of expectations, written one lap at a time from pole position to mid-pack reality. If you want more full NASCAR race breakdowns like this, subscribe to NASCAR Nation News for the next story as it develops.